Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is the Vulgar Marxist, and it is time once more for me to speak vile, awful heresy. The Green New Deal is currently being heralded and championed as a brilliant and innovative step forward, but is, in point of fact, an utter and complete non-starter. Now, before we proceed, we are going to have to go through a couple of anecdotes, some back of the envelope math, and a large graph. I don't enjoy doing this. I'd much prefer to just go wallowing into the proposal willy-nilly, but we do need some basis before we proceed. So, three quick anecdotes. The last job I worked for was hauling metal cans. And as a truck driver, I'm a pretty big contributor to carbon pollution. Trucks get between 5 and 8 miles per gallon. They pour pollutants into the atmosphere. So the more you have to haul things around to get them to where they need to be, the worse this problem is. Which brings us to the metal cans. Now, I live in Chicago, so I started in the middle of this process. But the way the cans moved was you would pick up uncoated metal sheets in Pennsylvania, haul them to Kansas City, where they would get a coating of some kind on them, haul the coated metal sheets to Wisconsin, where they would get a plastic food-safe layer put on one side, haul the plastic layered metal sheets to Iowa, where they would be stamped into cans, and then haul the cans to Ohio, where they would be distributed. Let me repeat that. To get a metal can that someone is going to open, pour the contents out, and throw away, the metal had to go from Pennsylvania to Kansas, to Wisconsin, to Iowa, to Ohio. 2,500 miles at 5 miles a gallon just to be thrown in the trash. Now, this one account had, I think, 50 people on it, but it was only one company. And I know there were more trucking companies doing these can runs, because I used to see them in and out all the time. And I know there were can factories we weren't going to. So let's say in total there were 1,000 drivers a day, burning 500 gallons a week, 50 weeks a year. That's 25,000 miles per truck, 25 million gallons. 25 million gallons of diesel fuel per year spent hauling the metal for cans around because they couldn't simply put the can plant in one place. Which brings us to our second anecdote. What happens with the stuff that gets put in the cans? There is a truck stop chain named Flying J. And Flying J has pizzas. Now, because of food safety, they can only leave the pizzas out on the counter for people to ask for an hour at a time. Then they have to throw them away. And I once asked, how many pizzas do you throw away at the end of an hour? And they said, usually 1 to 1.5. 1, maybe 2. Because they have like 4 pizzas out. Now, there are, I think, 600 Flying J locations, operating 375 days a year, 65 days a year. So 1 pizza per hour for 16 hours. Let's say 500 locations. Keep the numbers simple again. So that's a total of 8,000 pizzas per day times 300 days a year is about 2.5 million pizzas per year. Now let's call it 3 million. 3 million pizzas a year in the trash from this one truck stop. That's not even going into, say, Little Caesars or Ciberos, who have between them 6,000 locations, and I would guess 2 pizzas an hour, 10 hours a day. So that would be 120,000 pizzas a day, or 36 million pizzas annually in the garbage from 2 stores. But let's do another example here. I was stopping by Jimmy John's one time in Minnesota, I think it was, and I noticed, and the guy asked me, "Hey, do you want some free bread? I've got these day-old bread loaves. I've got to throw them out. Do you want a couple for free?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll grab free bread. Whatever, I can just eat it raw. I'm not picky or proud." But he had a stack of 20 loaves of bread there. There's the French bread rolls they have for the subs. But he had like 20 of them there, and he was going to have to throw out. So I was looking online. Now, the largest sub chain is Subway at 40,000 stores. Between the others, Jimmy John's, Firehouse, Quiznos, you might have another 20,000 stores. Nobody's close to Subway. Subway's huge. But let's say 60,000 stores, and let's be conservative. Let's say 10 loaves of bread every day. So each store is 3,000 loaves of bread per year, times 60,000 stores is 180 to 200 million loaves of bread thrown in the trash every year. And I would like to remind you again, all of this is subject to the same supply chain as the cans. The grain, to the mill, to the refinery, to the packaging, to the grocery store, no, not to the grocery store, to the wholesaler, to whatever plant makes the bread, to the distributor, to the store. And this isn't a straight line. This is the same thing as the cans, where it's bouncing Pennsylvania, Kansas, Ohio, Iowa, back and forth, burning fuel the whole way. Which brings us to our graph. I got this graph off of, I believe, Ezra Klein's blog a few years back. And it really does tell the story of climate change quite well. If you look, yes, the largest energy consumer is electricity generation, and most of that is wasted. However, the next two in order are transportation and industry. And what were we just talking about? Transportation and industry. The fact that all of these plants are scattered, grape-shot, across the United States with no coordination or planning is a huge contributor to carbon change. Now, yes, people driving their cars to work in Chicago is a large factor. I'm not going to pretend it's not. We do need better mass transit. We do need relocation assistance for people changing jobs so they can move to a house that is close to their job. That's something we have to do. But any coherent plan to address climate change will have to include the following items. 1. Decreasing electricity consumption. 2. Decreasing transportation usage. 3. Decreasing industrial production. Because let me be very clear, we're not going to magically technology our way to zero carbon pollution. We are going to have to cut consumption. We're going to have to cut the profits companies expect to receive. We're going to have to get rid of a lot of frills, things we cannot afford because they consume energy we can no longer produce. We can no longer belch out that much energy, and therefore we can no longer afford to do those things. So, what am I talking about here? Again, I'm not discussing getting rid of PlayStations or video games. Residential is in fact the smallest, or the second smallest, of the items on this graph. Your PS1, no one is coming for your PS2 or your PS3 or your Xbox, whatever. But what we are going to have to do is look very seriously at the idea that everyone needs a car. Look very seriously at the idea that throwing away a piece of furniture that you've owned for 2 years, throwing away dishes because they're 5 years old. Again, I have my grandmother's dishes. They're 60, 70 years old. They work fine. I have a frying pan from my great-grandmother. Cooks great. But yes, we are going to have to limit consumption. We will no longer be able to throw 180 million loaves of bread into the trash because they're a day old. Which brings us back to the original subject, the Green New Deal. And more specifically, what it does and does not include. Now, the tiny little window on this recording program can't show me what it says, so I'm reading off the website. Hopefully this doesn't jam the recording up too badly, but we'll cross our fingers. First point, guaranteeing a job with a family-sustaining wage, adequate family and medical leave, paid vacations, and retirement security to all people of the United States. Oh boy. We're going to begin with this. There are right now in the United States, and you can look the numbers up yourself if you wish. I'm not going to bother providing them here. I've shown them before on this channel. There are 120 million full-time equivalent jobs. That is, if we took all of the part-time jobs, mushed them together, cut them into 40-hour-a-week segments, we would have 120 million full-time jobs. There are, right now in the United States, between the age of 18 and 65, I believe 210 million people. Which means the Democratic Party is going to need to magic out of the ground 90 million new jobs without contributing in any way to the two largest contributing factors in climate change, transportation and industry. Not going to happen. Not even remotely ever going to happen. By definition, any socialist, any communist, most intelligent economist will tell you the number of jobs is a direct and immediate function of the number of consumers. That is, the demand of those consumers for goods and services. If you are going to functionally double the number of jobs, then by definition consumers will have to consume twice as much. But what did we just say? What did we just say we have to do? We have to cut consumption. We have to make consumption go down, which means the number of jobs is going to go down, not up, down. Now, if this plan contained a statement that the working week would be reduced to 20 hours and that wages would be correspondingly doubled, that might be a road forward. But that's not what I just read here. What I just read here is the Democratic Party is planning to create 90 million 40-hour-a-week jobs out of the clear blue sky, which isn't going to happen, and do it without increasing carbon pollution, which isn't going to happen. And with the very first item on this list, this entire plan disintegrates. But no, we're not going to stop here. We're going through this whole list, and a second one behind it. This is going to be a very long video, and I'm going to be very annoyed by the end of it. Item number 2, providing all people of the United States with high-quality health care, affordable, safe, and adequate housing, economic security, access to clean water, clean air, healthy and affordable food, and nature. This one is feasible. I have a couple of maps. Again, I'm not going to show them here. They're easy enough to find online. There are huge swaths of most Midwestern cities that are functionally abandoned. I think there was a survey, something like half the houses in Detroit are unoccupied. I know most areas of Chicago have upwards of 20% vacancy rates. And that's not even counting the lots, that's just the buildings that are still standing. You could very, very easily provide affordable housing to everyone simply by taking the houses no one is currently using and saying, yeah, you're not doing anything with that and you haven't done anything with that for the last 5 years. We're confiscating this house, renovating it, and selling it to someone who needs a house, okay? Again, would not be hard. But I'm almost completely certain that is not what is being talked about here. I would be extremely surprised if the Democratic Party proposed using eminent domain to seize vacant and underutilized properties in the inner city. I would be stunned if they did that. I would absolutely love for them to do a survey of vacant and underutilized residential, commercial, and industrial capacity. I can tell you it's huge. I can tell you there's a staggering number of warehouses and factories in this country that haven't been used for decades. They're just sitting there rotting. But again, that's not going to get us to climate neutral. Well, technically it will. I mean, they're building huge warehouses on 94 north of Chicago right now. And I know Milwaukee has a ton of old warehouses just sitting there vacant, doing nothing. So yes, ceasing the explosive construction industry that continues to build buildings we already have will contribute to climate change. But again, I don't see the Democratic Party doing anything remotely approaching a survey of vacant industrial capacity so we can start utilizing the capacity we have instead of building new capacity out of farm fields we desperately need to convert back to nature preserves. Clean water, clean air, healthy, affordable food, and nature. The Ogallala Reservoir is going to be an issue. If we are going to sustain our agricultural production levels, we are going to have to begin desalinizing water in the Texas Panhandle and piping it north. And I very much doubt there is a plan to do that. I've heard nothing about that in any of the writing about this thing. So, next item, providing resources, training, and high-quality education, including higher education, to all people of the United States. Already covered this. Right now in the United States, less than 9% of adults go to college, get a degree, and get a job in the field they studied. But we are going to spend hundreds of millions, if not, no, hundreds of billions of dollars, frankly, giving people degrees they are not going to use, contributing to what is, again, the single largest factor in climate change, electricity production, fueling all of these buildings, all of these classrooms, all of these computer labs. For degrees we don't need, that are not doing anything for our economy, that the people who have them aren't even using. And let's assume $20,000 a year tuition. Let's assume 1% of the population, so 3 million, let's say 15 million people going to college. That's $300 billion a year for this program. And I'm not saying $300 billion as in, oh my God, no, not the money. I'm not looking at the money. How many gigajoules, gigawatts, whatever, of energy is that going to consume? How many tons of carbon pollution is that going to generate? Getting them those degrees that, I repeat, they will never use. Because we have never needed the number of college degrees we have right now, much less triple that number. I mean, currently only a third of people graduate college, and less than a quarter of them use their degrees. So why? Why not simply make high school equivalent jobs pay enough that anyone can live off them? Why are we doing this? This is not about climate change. This doesn't help climate change. This doesn't contribute in any way at all. I spent 4 years in high school taking the same 8 courses year after year after year. There was no distinction between 10th grade English, 11th grade English, 12th grade English. I think I studied the same U.S. history curriculum 3 different times. If we actually streamlined high school curriculums, I'm pretty sure you could fit an associate's degree in there very easily. Not hard at all. But we choose instead to play let's pretend with college degrees as some sort of status symbol, and that's what this is about. This is about status. It has nothing to do with greenhouse emissions. College degrees are a status symbol, and they think everyone needs to have the same status symbol. They don't. We need to stop treating college degrees as a status symbol, not guarantee a status symbol to everyone. On to the next point. Meet 100% of the power demand in the United States through clean, renewable, and zero-emission energy sources. Possible. I like the sentiment. I don't know if we have the natural resources to do that, is the thing. Like the last time I checked, solar panels require rare earths, and I'm not sure we have enough of those. But yes, mandating solar panels on the roofs of, at the very least, any industrial structure, industrial and commercial, would be a huge step forward. So, yep, that one has my approval. Good job. I like. Repairing and upgrading the infrastructure of the United States, including ... by eliminating pollution and greenhouse gas emissions as much as technologically feasible. I would like to know what the hell that ... is. I'm tempted to go look elsewhere, but not right now. There's a couple of other articles I may do at the end. I may do a separate thing for them. If that including includes the US highway system, we're in very big trouble here. Because again, remember, from the first graph, the second largest contributor to climate change is transportation. Most of our infrastructure is roads. The first thing we need to do is stop shipping partially completed products from one end of our nation to the other end of our nation. The second thing we need to do is start moving completed products by rail, because it is much more efficient. Both of which necessarily entail we are not going to continue to need the US highway system in its current form. The US highway system is an anachronism. I'm sure everyone loves driving their car up the highway. Guess what? Too fucking bad. And yes, I recently changed from a dry box company to a company that does mostly rail freight, because I myself understand that's where the future is. We are going to have to do most of our shipping with rail freight. And frankly, if we have cars at all, we are going to have to transition back to the family car. One car per household at most. The idea that women must own a car to be liberate, no, try again, not happening. We do not have that room to throw. We do not have those emissions to waste. So, no, rebuilding our road infrastructure is not a priority. Rebuilding our rail infrastructure is a priority. Roads, not so much. Building or upgrading to energy efficient, distributed, and smart power grids, and working to ensure affordable access to energy. Again, we are dealing with a production and demand issue here. Okay? Having a smart power grid is meaningless if the aggregate demand for energy doubles or triples. We need to reduce the consumption of energy. And again, a lot of the energy waste in the first graph is the problem of energy produced but not consumed, which I'm not seeing any way to deal with. Like, you can have a power plant generating, say, 1,000,000 watts of energy for a community that's only consuming 100,000 watts of energy. I know this is a weird concept, but because of how electricity and power lines work, at least I understand them how they work, the amount of energy a power plant produces is always going to exceed by a very large margin the amount the community it's producing it for consumes. This is one of the reasons why localized solar panels are a much better solution than power plants, because the farther the electricity has to travel up the wires, the more of it you lose to heat. I don't have exact numbers. That's Phil Mason, Thunderfoot's specialization, but I know the farther it has to travel, the worse it gets. So yes, we should be looking at localized power options. We should be looking at tailoring the amount of energy produced to what the community is consuming. Again, I approve of this. I hope they get the details right. Okay, on to the next image. Upgrade all existing buildings in the United States and building new buildings to achieve maximal energy efficiency, water efficiency, safety, affordability, comfort, durability, including through electrification. Let's parse that a bit, shall we? First of all, the United States currently has, I think, 1,000 empty houses for every homeless person. We don't need any new buildings. Again, if this were to achieve nothing more than an inventory of existing vacant residential, commercial, and industrial capacity, I would consider that a victory in and of itself. Energy efficiency and water efficiency. We have been bulldozing buildings that were built like ovens to throw up styrofoam and sheet metal trash that leaks energy like a sieve. This is the stupidest exercise imaginable. I mean, everyone likes to rag on the old days. Dude, you've got a building that's heated by a single furnace in the basement. Yeah, it has to be built like an oven. It has to be staggeringly energy efficient. Maybe the windows weren't that good, but if you have an old brick building, I guarantee you, setting the windows aside, that thing retains heat like you would not believe. Water efficiency. I don't know what the heck they're going to do here, other than start collecting rainwater in very large quantities. The Ogallala Reservoir is a major problem. Like I said, we are going to have to start desalinizing ocean water, which frankly wouldn't be that bad an idea considering one of the impacts of greenhouse emissions is going to be the desalinization of the oceans. So if we're seeing large quantities of fresh water pouring into the oceans from melting ice caps, and we're taking large quantities of fresh water out of the ocean for agriculture, hopefully this can balance out. Safety. Not even going to go there. Affordability. We have already agreed this project is going to be breathtakingly expensive. I don't know why this is even in the list. This is going to cost trillions of dollars to accomplish for decades. It is likely going to cripple the US economy as a capitalist institution. There's nothing affordable about what we are going to embark upon. Comfort. Again, not something that's on the table. We are discussing an economy where using your grandmother's dishes is a status symbol, where you don't simply throw furniture away anymore because you're probably not going to be able to get more furniture because we can't afford the energy to build it anymore, where you don't have 2 or 3 cars per household, where you don't set the thermostat to 70 degrees and wander around in shorts and a t-shirt. We are going to have a society that a lot of people are going to be very uncomfortable with, and we won't have a choice. Durability? Yep. Yeah, that's going to have to be a priority from now on. You're going to have to build furniture that needs to last for 30, 40, 50 years. The concept of planned obsolescence is very likely going to have to be illegal. You are going to have to make it a criminal offense to design a product with an expected expiration that would otherwise be a durable product. Again, things like furniture, kitchen utensils, flatware, all of that is going to have to be designed to last generations, because we're not going to be able to spend the energy to make new plates for everybody every couple of years. That's going to be a thing of the past. I'm not certain what they mean, including through electrification. I'm not aware of any significant area of the United States that isn't electrified. Even in Alaska, you go to rural communities. I vacationed in Alaska one time with a friend of mine right after high school. And even the most rural community in Alaska had electricity. So I'm really not certain what they mean by that. Okay, 3 more to go. Overhaul the transportation systems in the United States to eliminate pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector as much as is technologically feasible, including through investment in 1, zero-emission vehicle infrastructure and manufacturing, 2, clean, affordable, and accessible public transportation, and 3, high-speed rail. Okay. 1, high-speed rail is a techno-fad. It has literally no practical application. Okay, it does absolutely nothing we cannot do with normal rail lines and consumes a crap ton of energy doing it. Public transit would need to be massively expanded in order to be feasible. And I mean massively. I had a friend in college who, to get to her classes on time, had to climb on a bus 2 hours before she had to be at the university, because the bus system was balkanized crap. We would need streetcars on every street, light rail / subway covering every neighborhood. It would be a huge expenditure. And yes, that's where the bulk of the infrastructure money is going to have to go, in massively expanding rail transport. Zero emission vehicle infrastructure and manufacturing. Bicycles aren't that hard to build, so I'm not seeing a whole lot of jobs there. Electric cars would only serve to add to the major contributor to fossil fuels, which is, again, electricity production. So I'm really not seeing how that is a viable plan. And again, we are talking about a massive increase in manufacturing, which is, once more, the third largest contributor to carbon emissions. So both number 1 and number 3 are entirely counterproductive here. Okay, high-speed rail would increase energy consumption. Building tens, if not hundreds of millions of electric cars will increase energy consumption. And what we need to do is decrease energy consumption. Spurring massive growth in clean manufacturing in the United States and removing pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from manufacturing and industry as much as is technologically feasible. Or we could manufacture less. It's another idea. We could just build less stuff. There's nothing else to be said here, okay? All of this is assuming a colossal increase in manufacturing and resource consumption while magically decreasing pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. That's not how this works. We need to decrease manufacturing. We need to decrease consumption, not increase them. Working collaboratively with farmers and ranchers in the United States to eliminate pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from the agricultural sector as much as is technologically feasible. Actually, getting them to decrease water consumption would be a much better plan. Okay? First of all, you're going to run into a huge problem with PETA, because the way you decrease cow farts entering the atmosphere is to put them in a barn and siphon off the methane from the stacks in the barn. That's how you do that. Which means we are going to have to get rid of open field grazing entirely to do this. But that's not our major problem. Our major problem is going to be fresh water. They have already had to pass an international agreement not to tap the Great Lakes in order to feed Western ranches and grain farms. Because I repeat, the Ogallala Reservoir is running dry, which means we are going to need a huge, absolutely staggering level of desalination along the Texas border, pumping that water up to Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, to fuel the grain industry. So what would a viable Green New Deal look like? Is the question Ms. Cortez has asked on Twitter. If you do not like my plan, come up with one of your own. Very well. Done. The first step is to inventory all available, unused or underutilized industrial, commercial, and residential capacity in the United States. Before we can get a grasp on the problem, we need to know the scale that we have. Second, a universal basic income is a requirement. There are going to be millions, if not tens of millions of people put out of work by the reduction in consumption and production that climate change is going to necessitate. You have to guarantee them shelter, food, and clothing, or they are never going to be on board with anything you're trying to do. Third, massive restructuring of U.S. industry, where if you are producing cans, the metal comes in one end, the cans go out the other, they go across the street to the tomato paste plant and have the tomato paste put in them. No more shipping metal plates halfway across the nation, then back and forth, then back and forth, and finally to the place where we're putting whatever the heck it is into the cans. We are going to need a massive restructuring of housing. You will have to seize any vacant housing tract and redevelop it. Detroit sitting half empty is no longer acceptable. You are going to have a carbon tax, okay? 2, 3, 4 cars per household, no longer acceptable. And no, we can't simply build hundreds of millions of green cars. That's going to consume energy we don't have. If you live in the city, learn to enjoy riding a bicycle. We can build streetcars, those work. But the current car mentality of the United States, no, not happening. There is going to have to have a wide-scale reduction in consumption. If you don't like your couch anymore, you will take it to a warehouse in the middle of town, and someone else can get your couch. If you don't like your table, your chair, whatever, you donate it, and someone who may want one can pick it up. We can no longer throw food away. It will have to be collected. We can no longer throw away old clothing. The sites I saw at Goodwill where they were literally dumping in the garbage tons of clothing every single week, no longer acceptable. We are going to have to produce less, consume less, reuse more. That is the only way this is going to get fixed. And the longer it takes the politicians in Washington to reach this conclusion, the worse this is going to be.